When I was about 9 years old, I lived with my mom and little sister in a small house in a quiet town. The street was mostly safe, and kids would ride their bikes outside in the summer. But even back then, there were things that didn't feel right about the house. My mom used to say it was old, and old houses make noises. But some of the things I remember from that time didn't sound like house noises. They sound like something else. Something I still don't really know how to explain. The first thing started one night when I couldn't sleep. I was lying in my bed with a blanket pulled up to my chin, staring at the little glow-in-the-dark stars on my ceiling. My room wasn't very big, just a bed, a dresser, and a toy chest near the window. I remember looking at the shadows on the wall from the trees outside. The branches swayed whenever the wind blew, and I told myself that's what I was seeing. But then I noticed one shadow wasn't moving like the others. It was in the corner, down low near my toy chest. At first, I thought it was a pile of clothes or one of my big stuffed animals. I almost laughed at myself because I thought I was just being a scared kid. But then I blinked, and the shadow was gone. I remember feeling cold, like the kind of cold that comes from the inside of your body, not the air. I pulled the blanket over my head and fell asleep. The next morning, I didn't even think about it until I saw my toy chest. It was standing open, like someone had been looking inside. I never left it open because my mom would yell if toys spilled out. I closed it and didn't say anything. A few weeks later, my sister, who was only 5, told my mom she didn't like the man in the closet. I basically froze when she said it because she said it so casually, as if it were just a fact. My mom brushed it off and said, "Little kids imagine things." But I saw my sister's face, and I could tell she wasn't making it up. She said he would stand in the closet at night and whisper, but she couldn't hear the words. My mom talked her in that night and said a prayer with her, but she didn't check the closet. Later that night, I woke up because I heard something dragging across my floor, like someone pulling their nails across the wood. I was too scared to move, but the sound stopped right by my bed. I was sure if I looked over the side, I'd see something staring up at me. I just froze there, clutching the blanket until I fell asleep again. The next morning, there were long scratches on the floor right by the side of my bed. They were fresh, like someone had carved into the wood. I remember running to show my mom, but she got angry. She said I must have been playing with something sharp or dragging furniture. I swore I hadn't, but she didn't believe me. After that, the nights got worse. I would hear faint whispers, almost like a radio on low volume, and it would come from my closet. Sometimes my sister would cry in her room, and when I ran in, she would be pointing at the corner saying, "He's there, he's there." I never saw him, but I believed her. You know when someone's watching you, and the hairs on your arms stand up. That's how it felt. The scariest night was in the middle of winter. I woke up and saw my bedroom door was open. Even though I always shut it, I could see the hallway light because my mom left one on for us at night. But then as I watched, the light in the hall went out. I thought maybe the bulb turned out. Then I heard footsteps coming down the hall. They stopped outside my door. I wanted to scream for my mom, but nothing came out. The door creaked, and I saw a tall, dark shape lean in, just its head poking into the room. I shut my eyes and pretended to be asleep. When I opened them again, the door was closed, and I was alone. In the morning, I asked my mom if she had come into my room. She said no. She had been asleep all night. My sister said she saw the man again, standing by her bed. We told my mom together, and she finally looked worried. She lit a candle and said a prayer in each room of the house. Things were quiet for a little while after that, but it didn't last. One afternoon, I came home from school before my mom. I was sitting on the couch doing homework when I heard the sound of the toy chest in my room slammed shut. The thing is, nobody else was home. I hoped it was just the wind, but when I walked down the hall, I saw my bedroom door was wide open. My toy chest was closed, but all my toys were scattered on the floor, like someone had dumped them out. I backed away and waited outside until my mom came home. When I told her, she still didn't believe me and said the cat knocked things over. Years later, after we moved out, I asked my mom if she ever experienced anything in that house. She hesitated, then said yes. She said sometimes she would wake up and see a shadow standing in her doorway. She said she never told us because she didn't want to scare us, but she admitted she believed there was something wrong with that house. She said she thought it was a man, someone who used to live there. She never said much more, but I know what I saw, and I know what my sister saw too. Even now as an adult, when I think about that time, I feel sick in my stomach. It wasn't imagination, it was something real, and it wanted us to know it was there. Sometimes late at night, when I can't sleep, I still hear the sound of nails dragging across the floor. When I was 10 years old, my family moved into a bigger house because my mom had just gotten remarried and we needed more space. The house was nice, newer than the one we lived in before, and it was in a quiet neighborhood with a lot of trees. I thought I would be happy there. At first, everything seemed normal, but then little things started happening that made me feel like the house wasn't right. My bedroom was at the end of the hall. It had 2 big windows that faced the backyard and a closet that was deeper than the one I had before. I liked it until the first night I slept there. I woke up around midnight because I heard something moving in the closet. It wasn't loud, just soft shuffling, like clothes being brushed against. I stared at the closet and told myself it was just the house settling. I know it sounds cliché, but most people, even as children, would assume small sounds coming from here and there in a house are just typical house noises that you hear every day. But then I saw the door move. It didn't swing open, but it shivered like someone had lightly pressed on it from the inside. I wanted to run to my mom's room, but I was frozen. I stayed that way until I fell back asleep, still staring at the closet. The next morning, the closet door was cracked open, just a little, even though I had shut it tight. I asked my mom if she had gone in there, and she said no. She said maybe the air vents pushed it, but I knew it wasn't the air vents. The nights after that got worse. I started hearing tapping on the window glass. At first, I thought it was tree branches, but when I looked, there were no branches near the window. The tapping would go on for minutes, and when I pulled the blanket over my head, it would stop. I tried to ignore it until one night I finally peeked out. I saw a pale hand pressed against the window. It was on the outside, but the window was on the second floor, way too high for anyone to reach without a ladder. The hand stayed there for a long time, just pressed without moving. Then it slid down slowly and disappeared. I didn't sleep at all that night. I told my mom, and she started cracking up laughing when I told her. She didn't believe me for a second when she saw that I wasn't just saying it as a prank or a joke. She leaned more into trying to convince me that I was probably in a half-asleep state and seeing things from my dream. But I knew that was a load of horse shit. My stepdad didn't believe me either. He said I was making it up for attention, and he also got a laugh out of it. But I started noticing he kept the hallway light on at night, so maybe he didn't feel as safe as he pretended. A month later, my little brother, who was 4, started talking about the white lady. He would say she came into his room and sat on his bed. My mom thought it was just his imagination, but one night I heard him screaming. I ran in and saw him curled up under his blanket, crying. When he finally calmed down, he said the white lady had been standing by his door, just staring at him. He said her eyes were all black. I believed him because of what I had seen at my window. I started sleeping with the blanket over my head every night, but that didn't stop the dreams. I began to dream of the white lady too. She would stand in the corner of my room and whisper my name. Her voice was dry, like leaves rubbing together. Sometimes I would wake up and still hear it, faint but definitely real. One night, I woke up and saw her standing at the foot of my bed. She was taller than anyone I had ever seen. Her head almost touched the ceiling. She wore a long white dress that moved even though the air was still. Her hair was black and stringy, and her face was pale like chalk. Her eyes were like empty black holes. I tried to scream, but nothing came out. I shut my eyes, and when I opened them again, she was gone. But my closet door was wide open. After that, I couldn't go in my closet anymore. I begged my mom to let me sleep in her room, but she said I need to learn how to be brave. I think she didn't want to admit she was scared too. The worst night came during a storm. Heavy rain and loud wind. I woke up to the sound of my window creaking. When I looked, the window was slowly sliding open. Even though it was locked, I could see the lock turning by itself. The window opened all the way, and I saw the white lady climb in. She didn't move like a person. She floated. Her feet never touched the floor. She drifted toward my bed and leaned down until her face was right in front of mine. I felt her cold breath on my skin. She whispered my name again, and this time I screamed as loud as I could. My mom and stepdad came running in, but when they turned on the light, the window was closed and locked, and no one else was there. They yelled at me for scaring everyone, but I could see in their faces that they were worried. The weird thing about that part of the story is that I don't vividly remember what happened between the moment I saw that lady floating towards me and my screaming. The best I can explain it is that I sort of blacked out for a moment before remembering screaming and having my parents rush into the room. My window was closed again, which would suggest to people that it was just a night terror. That's what my parents believed it was. I think my mom started taking me to therapy for a while because they were worried about me. We lived in that house for 3 more years, and I never got used to it. My brother stopped talking about the white lady, but I think it was because he was too scared, not because she stopped visiting. Sometimes I would hear him crying at night and saying, "Go away." I think he just also didn't want to be forced into going to therapy. Sometimes when it storms at night, I still get scared to even get up to go to the bathroom or get water. I'll glance over at corners of the room, making sure I don't see something tall lurking there. It goes to show how these kinds of things stick with you into adulthood. I'd be more open to believing it was simply night terrors if it were not for the fact that I saw that hand on my window before my little brother even first mentioned the white lady. I guess this is just one of those freakish experiences that cannot be explained. When I was 8, I rode my bike every day after school. I lived on a quiet street with small houses and big trees. I learned every crack in the sidewalk. I learned where the mailman stopped. One house I liked was down the block. I had to ride near the corner of the block to get a view of the yard. There was a long driveway and a wide lawn. An older man stood in that driveway most afternoons. He'd always wear a hat, and he'd stand where the driveway met the sidewalk and look down the street. When I rode by, he would say hi. He never came onto the sidewalk. He never stepped off his driveway. He would call out and wave, and then go back to watching his yard. I always waved back. My mother told me to never cross the street by myself, so I never crossed to actually speak to the man face to face, and the man knew that. He would call to me from his place and ask about school. He would ask about my bike. He asked if I liked the bell on my new red bike. I even remember once he told me a joke about a cat that made me laugh. We talked for weeks like that. The conversations were short. They were always from his driveway to the curb. He seemed to know small things about me without me saying them. For example, the fact that I had a little brother, or my dad got a new car. I never told him these things. I thought maybe he had seen us from down the block or something, like he was just a neighbor who watched the street. One day, I got a brand new bike. It was red with a shiny bell. Like I mentioned before, I rode down the block slow, and he called out, "Nice bike." He asked if I wanted to race to the corner. I told him no because my mom would be angry. He smiled and said, "One day." After that, we talked about small things. He told me about a bird that liked his fence, and then about a rule about never stepping on a certain stone. Then he told me a story about a dog that would always bring a slipper back. He sounded like someone who had time to watch small things. I started looking for him when I was on my bike. Some afternoons he was there, and sometimes he wasn't. Then, one week he stopped coming out. I rode down the block past the house, and no one stood there. The curtains in the front window were closed. I slowed down and looked at the driveway, and it was kind of weird not seeing the man there. I wanted to ask my mother if I could cross the street. She said no. She said the road was not for unsupervised kids. Anyway, a few days later, I saw a woman in the backyard of that house. I had never seen anyone in that yard before. I had to ride around the corner to see her. She had her hair tied back, and she held a watering can, so I had to assume she was watering flowers back there. I stopped my bike down the street so she would not see me too close. I wanted to call across the road like I always did, but I didn't. I don't know if I was too shy or scared of what my mother would say if I were staying out too late. A few days later, I rode by again, and the woman was on the back porch. She had a mug in her hands. I sat on my bike and watched for a bit. Then she opened a small side door and went around the house. I pedaled slowly to the corner and waited where the sidewalk curved. I looked down the block just to ensure my mom wasn't outside. Then I decided I would quickly cross the street. I pushed my pedals and crossed like my life depended on it. The house looked bigger from up close. The driveway was long and sloped down to the road. I felt like I was not allowed to be there. I stopped at the end of the driveway near the back gate. The woman heard me. She turned and saw a small boy with a red bike standing at the gate. She looked surprised, but not angry. She came to the gate and opened it, and she asked what I was doing back there. I told her about the man on the driveway and that he used to say hi when I would bike past. I told her he knew my name and that he said he would race me one day. She wiped her hands on her dress like she had been working, and then said the man I described sounded like her husband. I smiled, thinking she would say he went on a trip, or he's inside, and she'll go get him. But she didn't smile. She said he had died the year before. She said he died in his chair. His name was Harold. I felt a cold space open in my chest. I asked her if she had a picture. I wanted to see him. She went inside and returned with a small frame. The photograph showed a man with the same hat and the same broad smile. He actually bore a resemblance to the man I'd always seen. Then the woman said the photo was new, taken only a couple of years ago. She said her husband had a scar across his cheek since he was young. I remembered the man on the driveway. He had no scar. He had a round, plain face and smooth skin. The hat matched, and the smile matched, but the scar did not. I told her I once saw a mark on the man's face, but I thought he rubbed his cheek once. She said that scar had been there for a long time, but that he'd hide it under stubble sometimes. She said again that her husband had died, and that no one else lived in the house. She said she had moved back last summer to take care of the garden, and that she's never seen or heard anyone standing in the driveway. I honestly started to get kind of scared at this point. I thanked her and backed down the driveway. I didn't look back into the yard again. I rode home slow and put the bike in the garage. The bike ride back was kind of like how when you almost get into a car accident, you'll drive home the rest of the way in silence with the radio off. My mom didn't ask any questions when I got home. She just told me to be careful. That night, I couldn't sleep. I thought about the man with the hat. I thought about his laugh and the way he said my name, and I thought about the scar in the photograph. The next day, I went by the house, and the curtains were open. Sunlight touched the porch and driveway, but no one stood in the driveway. I waved from the corner, but no one waved back, so I pedaled away. For a while, nothing else happened. I tried to forget. I made new routes on my bike. I talked with kids on other blocks. Weeks passed. Then one night, I woke up and heard the sound of the wind outside, and I remembered the stories of the white lady and the man in the driveway. Nothing ever came directly after that night, but the memory stayed. I never forgot the feeling of the cold in my room, the whispering voices, the shadows that moved in ways that didn't make sense. I learned to be cautious, to look twice before approaching any strange figure or walking alone at night. And even now, as an adult, when I ride my bike past that block or see a driveway like that, I remember the man, I remember the white lady, and I remember the fear that wasn't just in my imagination, it was real.